Minilusaha Otomahe Awati. Inawaeki Peggy Phelps Echiapi Na Adeoeki. Also means Echiapi. Good day, relatives. I shake each of your hands with a good heart. My name is Tatewi Means, and I exist in Washington, Lakota, and Oglala, Lakota. I grew up in my father's homelands, the Pine Ridge Reservation here in Oglala Territory. We welcome you. I'm the Executive Director of Thunder Valley CDC, and welcome to the inaugural, the first annual Lakota Media Summit. We're really excited to bring this to all of you, and each year we hope that it just gains more and more momentum around this very important movement of narrative shift, creating these narrative shift and culture shifts across our communities from that very deficit-based narrative, survival-based narrative, to one that is hopeful and thriving and forward-looking, that highlights all the strength in our communities and highlights all the hope that we have in our communities. That's the impetus behind this gathering, to give us a chance to gather in community with our young people, with our elders, community members, and our non-Indigenous allies in the media, to have really honest and open conversations around how to tell Indigenous stories. How do we want to be represented, and how important that representation is of us in the media, in film, and all of the things that our young people see because of its impact on overall well-being in our communities. And so I'm really excited to see all of you here. I know that more people will be coming in throughout the day. We have a strong contingency of youth attending, which is really exciting. So I'm sure they're making their way up here. But it's an honor to have you all here in Oglala Territory, Oceti-Sakowin Territory. We have some very esteemed presenters. One will hear right after this welcoming address, and we're very honored to have Mr. Eaglehart here with us, and many, many others. So with that, I'd just like to take the time to introduce, first to thank my staff, our staff at Thunder Valley, for all the work that was put into making this happen. There was a lot of lessons to learn for next year, but really proud of the efforts that went into making this happen. So good job on that. So now I'd like to introduce Red Dawn Foster, Senator Red Dawn Foster. She's a politician serving as a member of the South Dakota Senate in the 27th District. She's elected in November of 2018. She assumed office on January 8th, 2019. Senator Red Dawn Foster was born on the Pine Ridge Reservation and a member of the Navajo and Oglala Lakota nations. She has been a champion in and outside the legislature for improved education standards, environmental stewardship, and justice for murdered and missing Indigenous people. So let's give a warm welcome to Red Dawn Foster.
Magakiapi, Chaje Michwaki, Red Dawn Foster, Machapi, Chate Washtia, Nape Chiuzape. Hello, my relatives, Red Dawn Foster. I am Oglala Lakota, born for Kia'ani. My family is from Pine Ridge, the Nelson Tioshpai. Thank you, Thunder Valley, for creating this amazing opportunity to learn more. And I want to thank Tatewi for her amazing leadership and just everything that both Thunder Valley and Tatewi does out of love for the people. It is amazing to be here today, to see all these Indigenous faces bringing our stories, our struggles, our worldview to mainstream media. I never thought I would see within my lifetime what we are experiencing now. We may not realize it, but we are in time of revolution. A revolution of the way we think, the way we love each other, the way we feel, and we're bringing those stories to the world. So as we go on today, I love seeing the elders here uplifting, amplifying, and giving lifeblood to our stories and our struggles. We see Indigenous representation more than ever in the arts, news, media, and politics. So I want to thank you and welcome you to our homelands.
How about another round of applause for Red Dawn here? I made a phone call this morning, and this morning I called my uncle over in the lands of the Sisituma, And I was talking to him and I said, Uncle, how are you doing? And he responded with something very simple. He says, I am still alive, he said. Meaning, he wanted me to pass this on. Meaning that we woke up this morning, therefore we have an opportunity to do as best as we can for all of those coming after us. And so I am very happy to be here, to be serving as one of your co-MCs. And how about a round of applause for Thunder Valley for putting on such a beautiful thing in our media summit. And coming to the stage here right now, we are privileged and we are highly honored to have Miss Sarah Eagle Elk with us. And as our Eagle Heart, I'm so sorry. Look how nervous I am. My hands are sweaty. Yeah, Eagle Elk or what? See all the Eagle Elks in the room. I apologize, that was out of nervousness. Well, head there, me talk up here. Well, let's talk about tapo. Sarah Eagle Elk, Wambali Shinawiya. Eagle Heart. Let me read this now. Please behave. Wambali Shinawi. Of the Lakota is an Emmy award-winning social justice storyteller, entrepreneur, and philanthropic leader. Sarah recently co-founded Zuya Entertainment to create multi-platform story based in her unique worldview infused with a beautiful Lakota culture. In 2022, Miss Eagle Heart co-founded Return to the Heart Foundation to support innovative Indigenous women-led projects for climate justice, narrative change, civic engagement, healing, and restorative and regenerative development. Prior to this role, she served as CEO of Native Americans in Philanthropy. In 2017, Miss Eagle Heart won the American Express NGen Leadership Award, which honors an accomplished charitable community leader, age 40 or under, who has demonstrated significant progress in addressing society's critical needs. In 2014, she received the National Center for American Indian Enterprise and Development's 40 Under 40 Award, a prestigious award which recognizes 40 emerging American Indians from across Indian country who have demonstrated leadership, initiative, and dedication and made significant contributions in business and or their communities. Her storytelling accomplishments include her narrative change partnership with John Legend's Get Lifted Film Company and the studios on virtual reality project Crow the Legend, led to an Emmy in Outstanding Interactive Media in 2019. In 2021, Miss Eagle Heart also contributed to This Is How We Come Back Stronger, published by Feminist Press. She also co-wrote Warrior Princess Strikes Back, How Lakota Twins Fight Oppression and Heal Through Connectedness. And with her identical twin sister and psychotherapist. Did I get that right? You got to excuse me, I went to school on the res. Anyway, just kidding. Emma Eagle Heart, White, which will be published in January 2023 by Feminist Press. Miss Eagle Heart holds a BS in Mass Communications and a BS in American Indian Studies from the Black Hills State University, as well as an MBA from the University of Phoenix. She is also an exclusive public speaker with the American Program Bureau. She is based in Los Angeles, California, and the Pine Ridge Indian Reservations. Please help me welcome with a warm round of applause, Miss Sarah Eagle Heart.
Betty Washday. Wambishinawi Amachiapi. Chante Washday Nape Chizake. I am just so happy to be here. I am a public speaker with the American Program Bureau, which I don't know that any of you know about them, but they're a big national, international group, and I got connected with them last year, which was a great thing, but I'm doing this on like the side of that because I'm not supposed to be doing other things in not through them, so don't tell anybody. I wanted to say, like, to start out here, I know the title says I'm going to talk about history, but I'm not really going to. I had told the staff at Thunder Valley that I didn't feel like I should be talking about the history of the media when that hasn't necessarily been my focus in my career. My focus in my career has been bridge building, educating, and advocacy. And so as a Ogallala Lakota that grew up on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in the Lake Creek District, and then I really believe that being in that area 1 mile outside of Martin, South Dakota, which many of you know has historically been very racist, and there's been a lot of racial tension there. I feel like growing up there, I really had to navigate that worldview and that tension from the earliest days, really. And that really influenced me and what I've done in my life. So I'm also a mother. I have 2 sons, Aaron and Brendan. This is actually a picture of Brendan when he was little at the powwow eating, and he's now 23. And my oldest one is 26 years old. And they're both going to school and figuring out life right now. Their father is also Ogallala Lakota, Richard Cooney, who was in the U.S. Marine Corps. So after college, I spent a decade as a military wife, traveling all over, and then started my own thing working at the church. So what I'm going to share today is really about understanding Lakota worldview and how we navigate in the Western worldview and space out there. Because what I've realized in my life is that as a Lakota, growing up on the reservation, there are certain things and protocols and nuances that we understand because Lakota people are experiential teachers. So my aunties, my grandma, which my grandmother is Mary Rose Crazy Thunder, and my mother is Emmy Eagleheart, and then my father's side is the Trimble side, actually. So John Trimble is my biological father, although I didn't know him growing up. And then my Al Trimble, who is a previous president of the Oglala Sioux tribe, is also on the paternal side. So I want to start out with, we could go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to start with the phrase that we say a lot. I tried to explain it to non-natives as Midakuya Oyase is the Lakota Amen, because then they really understand it. A lot of times I see people use the translation of, they call it an ancient Indian saying. And of course, I always get really irritated by that. We still say this. This is still, very a part of our culture. And, the idea of, we're all related and we're all connected. I remember probably about 20 years ago, there was an elder, Don Coyas, who asked me about my life. And you're going to hear a lot about my life and my upbringing here as I tell these stories of what I've done and how I've accomplished it, but, grounding it really in Lakota worldview. He asked me, after everything that you've been through, how is it that you're able to accomplish everything that you've been able to do? You've come out of a lot of trauma, able to be so successful. And my sister and I, being Chekwas and always reflecting, always observing the world around us, we really thought about that. And we said, we think the reason why is because we were really grounded in spirituality. My family, my great-grandma, Emma Gravehawk, was very devout Episcopalian. And so my family made sure we were baptized and confirmed, but we also followed Lakota spirituality at the same time. So in our world, we didn't really have to have that choice of choosing, and we're really fortunate to have access to ceremony and prayer. But what I realized is that not all Lakota people have that same access to ceremony sometimes. And so I realized that the phrase Midakuya Oyase it's a reminder to help your people, but it's also a reminder that you are connected to something, someone bigger than you, Tunkashla, the Great Spirit. And so as you go through life as Lakotas, you're constantly thinking, or this was me, how do I help my people? And I really believe it was because, of this phrase that reminded us of that connectivity to Tunkashla, but also the collective responsibility that we have to one another. And so, I also talk about Lakota laws. And this is a lot of what I share in my presentations everywhere. The reason why is because a lot of people don't understand a value system. And I remember when I was talking to Auntie Ethelene not too long ago, I'm a part of the Badwin Tioshkai, by the way. Auntie Ethelene and I was telling her about my book, and I was kind of getting her advice, and I called them values. And she said, no, they were laws. She said, values is a westernized term, interpretation. And when you take a value, you can think about it like you can take it or leave it. But when you think about it as a law, that's it. And there were consequences to that law. And I thought about that, and I was like, you're right. She's really right, because as Lakota people, when I think about our laws of praying, respect, caring and compassion, honesty and truth, generosity, humility, and wisdom, I grew up with this idea that they were absolutes, so when I was out traveling the world, I was like, I didn't understand how they could be so disrespectful, And then I would get annoyed with Native people that showed me disrespect, And I thought, wow, there's really, I realized that not everybody had access to those same education and teachings. And so I really think it's important to understand that, but also to understand, that, these were laws. But the other thing I tell people in my presentations is I talk about how the worldview of Lakota people, and many of you know this, if you're very fortunate to grow up in our communities, some of the first stories that you'll hear is about the white buffalo calf woman bringing the pipe to our people. And you hear about how, when two men looked upon her, one of them, had bad thoughts and was turned to ashes, right? And then the other man recognized her as, sacred. And then she told him to go back and prepare for the people that brought the pipe to us and brought all of our sacred ceremonies and rites. So when you think about that that's a origin story, that's a creation story for us and our spirituality. It's a grounding, it's our foundation of the way that we interact in the world and what we do. And so this is a photo actually of my great grandmother, Emma Bravehawk, with my uncle actually, who recently passed away last year. And then this teepee photo is actually at a memorial dinner. And then the other photo is of me and my twin sister at our naming ceremony. So all of those rites we learned, but when I look at the photo of me and my sister at our naming ceremony, I think about how you can't see them, but there are grandmothers standing behind us. And I look at the photo and I look at, the star quilts that we're sitting on, because my grandmother makes star quilts and has forever. And she hand quilts them. So she has done this since forever, because she always had 2 or 3 jobs to, take care of her family. And she would wake up at 4 a.m. and I would see her get to work making these star quilts. And then our bead work was actually done by my Auntie Mabel, who passed away almost a year ago. She was a school teacher in Allen, actually at American Horse School for over 30 years. And she was like a mother figure to me. So, it's been a rough year with the loss of 2 of an auntie and an uncle in my family. But when I look at these photos, I think of how loved I am. Because we're sitting on star quilts, we're holding the pillows that our grandmothers made us, we're wearing beadwork that our family made us, and then our elders are standing behind us. And so even though all of the struggles that I've been through, I knew that we were loved. And so to Wahela extended family, a lot of people don't understand that in the white world, Washichu world is very nuclear. Your mom, dad, and your brother, sister, like that's it in your family. But when you're Lakota, if you're very fortunate, you have an extended family. And so we were very fortunate that we had an extended family. And my mother had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And everybody took care of us, and we were the eldest in our generation. And my Auntie Mabel had a few babies that were born with water on the brain before we were born, healthy. And so our family very much protected us, cared for us, cherished us, as little babies, because then we were the oldest and then we were twins. So we grew up with this knowledge of people saying, oh, you're special, you're checkbox. Of saying to us that you have a different responsibility, that you're sacred. And so when we were observing the world and looking at the world, we really understood that we had a different role to play. But I also think because we were very reflective with each other all the time, we really learned to live our life according to spirituality and where we were being called at any given point. So pretty much everything I've done in my life has been grounded in spirituality. I actually make decisions that way. Every place that I've worked has been because I felt like I was supposed to work there. A lot of the decisions that I made in my life are because I felt the faith that I had in Takashla, the creator that was guiding my life, led me down pathways that I could have never imagined, but it also gave me the courage to be able to follow, even when I didn't know what was going to happen at the end of the road. And that really is that Lakota spirituality grounding that I was very fortunate to have been raised around. But also, nobody's perfect, and I'm not saying that my family is perfect because they're not. We had a lot of trauma, that happened in our family too. And I talk about it because when I tell my story, a lot of people think, oh my goodness, it's so devastating. But then I think to myself, actually, I know several people that have a very similar story in their life as Lakota people. And so I realized that I could help share and educate just by telling my story. So my mother up there, she's the one in the photo by herself, and then she's in the green hair. When we were 7 years old, we were on New Year's Day, 1985, we were driving on Rosebud Indian Reservation where she was a tribal cop. So she was a single mom. She went to school, became a tribal cop. My aunties, actually, my Auntie Mabel, Auntie Jan, and Auntie Deb, mostly my Auntie Mabel, though, would care for us when my mom was away, when she was away at school at the academy. So this day in 1985, she waited. She waited to drive on New Year's Day because she was worried about drunk drivers. And that morning, we got up and we left to go visit my grandma, and we were run off the road by 2 drunk drivers. My mother, I just remember waking up from this accident and being in the car, and I can remember everything about seeing my mother unconscious and my brother and sister in the back seat unconscious. And then we went to the hospital. I remember being in the hospital, and nothing happened to me, by the way. I bit my tongue. My sister broke her arm, my brother broke his leg, and I remember being very jealous that I didn't have a cast, because I really wanted one. All I did is bite my tongue. So, and I was watching all of the adults leave the room one by one, because sometimes in a car accident, it's kind of like a reunion too. You see all your relatives you haven't seen in a long time, you're at the hospital. And so I watched them leave one by one, and I followed them. And they were going into a room down the hallway. And as I walked in the room, I saw my mother sitting in the middle of the room, and she was surrounded by her brothers and sisters. And so I started running toward her, and I said, "Mommy, Mommy." And she looked at me and she said, "Who's this little girl?" She said, "You better get her back to her parents. I bet they're really worried about her." And I was 7 years old. I'm trying to understand that, like, my mother couldn't remember who I was. And I stood there in shock. And then my other auntie said, "Come on, Sarah," and took me back to the other room. And at the time I was like, oh my goodness, it took me a long time to realize, that when that moment happened, I blamed myself. Because when you're little, that's what you do. You think something happened and you think it's your fault. And so when I went back into that room, I saw everybody still playing and happy and nice, right? And I had just found out that my mother didn't remember who I was. I thought to myself, I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to tell them that Mom doesn't remember us. And it was a long road from there because my mother had a post-traumatic head injury. And she was mentally a teenager, about 16 or 17. And then when her memory was actually about 30 seconds long. So she would forget over and over. And she would scream because she would know that she knew things, but she couldn't really remember what it was. And so she was really frustrated and she would scream. And at that time, they really didn't talk about mental health on the reservation. They didn't know how to tell us. They just said, oh, her nerves are going to grow back together. And so we thought she was going to become, the mother that we knew before. In fact, she was just a changed person, and she began to self-medicate with alcohol, with drugs, and she could present well, which meant she could fake it. She could fake it like she had it together. And so we would go with her for a little while, and then it would fall apart, and then we'd go back to our grandma's house or back to our auntie's house, and then we'd go live with her for a while, and then it would fall apart. So that was about a 7-year time period before I turned 14, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm staying with my grandma, that's it. Like, I can't do this back and forth. And you think about that, I was 14, trying to find my stable, secure, safe place. That was me deciding that. But I was fortunate because I had extended family that took me in without any question, even though essentially I was an orphan. I was an orphan, but I didn't feel that way because I had extended family that, my auntie that always would take us to powwows and fun dances or come to our games or whatever it was. So we were very, very fortunate in that way. By 16 years old, by this point, I had been a part of mentoring programs. So there was a Center of Substance Abuse Prevention program that was on the reservation. You may remember Everett Kettle was a part of that, leading that, and Vince Brewer, Cecilia Fire Thunder, Chris Eaglehawk. They were mentors as a part of this program, and they taught us Lakota laws, and they taught us how to be camp counselors, and we did that in Black Hills. And then, so we were very grounded in our culture, our value system, and then I wanted to be a writer, and I used to keep a journal. I still do. But I started really young. I started at like 12 or 13. And I wanted to remember everything, so I wrote down all kinds of notes, and I'm rereading them right now. I was rereading them with writing the book because I kept all of them. You should see the stuff I kept track of. I kept track of cute boys. I kept track of like the ones that I would meet at powwows, or I kept track of how much contacts cost because I'm very blind, by the way. So there's several passages about contact lenses and like when I'm going to get them, and be very excited about it. And then I went to work for Indian Country Today as a summer intern because Amanda Takes Work on It was in my community, and she said, oh, you should go work as a summer intern, and she got me connected to Native American Journalists Association, and I went to summer camp there. So they had me covering tribal politics at 16 and 17. I said, they just threw me to the wolves. They just were like, go cover tribal politics. So I did that, and then go ahead next slide. So then also at 16 years old, I protested my high school because Bennett County High School had a homecoming ceremony where they had 5 warrior princesses that sat around a fire, and it was mostly a Washichu farming town at that time. And they would sing Indian love songs, cross-legged, and then the medicine man would dance around the women, and he would look in their mouth, look in their ears, he would pet them, and then he would weigh them. So he would dance around the women, and then he would pick them up, like pretend that he was gonna pick them up, and then dance around another woman, and then whoever he stood up all the way was the gift to the big chief. And they've been doing this for 57 years at that point. And so our protest at 16, and literally it was a decision between me and my sister, who we had watched it 1 year, and then this was our second year watching it as like juniors. And I just remember us sitting there because we were really kind of telepathic at times, and we knew what each other was thinking. And I just remember thinking, like, one of us was just like, and the other one was just like, I know. And then that was it. That was literally our decision to protest our high school. Because we knew that nobody else was going to do it. We also knew that we were going to be seniors the next year. We knew that we had to stand up and do something. And so even our sign is because we didn't even really know how to protest, but we knew that they got signs together. So our sign says, simply respect Lakota culture is respect too much to ask. And we just had a handful of young women at this first protest that came. And they were hoping we would just go away. They said a lot of things to us. On the first day of our senior year, our principal said to us, everyone thinks they're protesting because you're mad you're not going to be a warrior princess. And we were just like, no, that's not it. And it was very traumatic because people were mean to us. Like, they would call us names. They said they wanted to throw rocks at us if we were going to go to anything. We were very involved in our high school, by the way. Band, cheerleading, basketball, home ec, all this stuff. We were very involved. We went there since we were kindergarten. So we knew everybody. They were all of our friends. And all of a sudden, pretty much the whole town was pissed at us. Excuse my French, but they were mad. And we would walk into grocery stores and they would stop and stare at us. We had some friends of ours who they realized that probably our safety was a concern. And just like some Lakota friends of ours were like, we're just gonna go with you so that you don't have to be alone, because they were worried that we needed protection. So even at 16, we were having to deal with these racial dynamics, and we protested for 4 years, and then we had, I knew the media, right? So I was like, well, who do you call? You call Keeley, because had been on the radio there, and so I knew some of the people at Keeley, so I was there on the radio. I was like, we just tell people. And then we told the Indian Country Today, and then they, of course, like, wrote articles. And so we started telling our media friends about it. And then they started to come, and the next year, we had a group of 100, and we had like a educational forum in the park. The Lakota Student Alliance was there to support us. American Indian Movement came to support us. And we were just these 2 young women who knew that this thing was wrong. Even though everyone was telling us, they were saying, why won't you compromise? Why can't we just call the medicine man Little Chief? Why won't you, you girls don't know anything. They would write editorials about us in the newspaper about how we didn't know anything and we were too young and dumb and that all we wanted was attention. Which we all know today that that's a tactic, right, to discredit protesters. So that was my first protest. But I think it's important to share because, that's everything that we're doing today. And that protest would have been one of the earliest protests against mascots. And we were just these 2 young twins that knew we had to do something. So when you think about that, you think about all of these stories that I just told you is really a part of Indigenous worldview. And this definition is from the Indigenous Life course that was commissioned when I was CEO at Native Americans in Philanthropy. And it was commissioned because I went to so many different events and people were really into talking about youth, boys and men of color, mostly youth of color, BIPOC youth. And every time they would bring up anything about Native American youth, it was always deficit based. It would be a long list of everything that was wrong in our communities, everything that was bad. And then they would never talk about any solutions. And I would get so annoyed by that I said, we need to commission something that's asset based. And so this report talks about worldview, and it was written by Dr. Rosalie Gonzalez, Dr. Michael Yellowbird, and Dr. Karina Walters. And so they came up with these terminology that I think is really important to understand how we see the world. So Native Americans understand the world and the meaning of life in terms of nature, and nature and space are indissociably linked to thought and experience. This worldview orients Native spatial concepts of natural cycles, seasons, harvesting cycles, moon patterns. Therefore, Native Americans see their responsibility as living in harmonious and balanced relation with all of creation, including other tribes and racial ethnic communities. In contrast, Western Europeans understand the world and the meaning of life in terms of history and tend to orient their life towards future, toward goals, destiny, final purpose. The worldview reflects temporal concepts of progress, development, and colonization. Now, I share that because a lot of us, especially if you're working in any system, whether it's business or philanthropy or the nonprofit systems or church, we're constantly navigating these systems that were built under a Western way of thinking. At the same time, in the media, it's interesting because in the media, they will tend to uplift one person, one leader. And then in philanthropy, they fund one leader. They fund somebody that they're excited by, and that's how you get a lot of funding. And it's hard because as leaders in our community, we're asked to step up, and then we're asked to step back. And if you shine too bright, then they're like, oh no, you shouldn't be like that. Don't, settle down, And so I feel like we're constantly like navigating this like world. I recently had somebody tell me that, you weren't supposed to be the star. And I was like, what are you talking about? I wasn't even trying to be the star. I was trying to get stuff done, But we have to navigate these worlds. And I think about, as Lakota people, we know that we come from the stars and our relatives are there at the stars. And I think about how, in my interpretation of the way that leadership, as Lakota leaders, what we need to do is that some of us are called to do some things. And I can tell you, like, pretty much everything I've done, it wasn't because I wanted attention or glory or anything. I did it because I felt like I was supposed to. And I felt like, I always also knew, like, when you're supposed to go down a certain path, that you're called to a path. And I would recognize this through, when you think about it, spiritual leaders, priests or medicine men, they're called down a particular path. And they might try not to go down that path. And I used to actually witness priests, so Native American priests, who didn't want to be a priest. And they would try to run away, and they would be so unhappy trying to run away. And then when they finally followed their calling, they were so happy and joyous because that was actually what they were supposed to do. And so I think about it in terms of that and how we are constantly navigating these worlds and our own calling. And for me, it's just been being able to say yes when maybe nobody else sees what you see on that pathway. This is another terminology that I think is important. Original instructions that refer to diverse teachings, lessons, ethics expressed in origin stories, traditions passed down from generation to generation on how to be a good human being, live in reciprocal relationship with our relatives, and they celebrate our interdependence and interconnection with diversity and each other. And how we heal. This is really also important, the cultural connection and connectedness, family connectedness, community control, spirituality, and ceremonies. This is how our people are going to heal, or through these protective factors. And these were actually this part of the same presentation. The next one. Extended kin bonds and networks, healthy traditional food, and youth self-efficacy. So all of these practices are important because, this is actually what safeguards our children. This is what makes sure that we have these safety nets, having access to traditional foods, and then our youth being able to have develop capacities that promote confidence and competence. So obviously my young adult support and learning, having mentorship was really important. And for me, growing up to be a person that felt confident enough to say yes. I was called to work at the Episcopal Church. And I'll tell you, it was not in my plans whatsoever. I went to school for communications. I wanted to be a writer. And then I ended up working at an Indian casino in San Diego. And so I never thought I would go from casino to church, but that's what happened. And at the Episcopal Church at that time, I was hired at 30 years old to work with a lot of priests that were working at an international level. So I was young to be in the role as a program officer, missioner for Indigenous peoples. And so my role was really to advocate for Native American communities within the church. And then my role was also to work with the denomination on their advocacy because they have over 2 million members in the church. So they actually, faith-based communities have a big role when it comes to lawmaking and decisions. They can influence a lot. So in 2009, about a month after I was hired, the Episcopal Church became the first church to create the doctrine of discovery. Manifest Destiny, the inherent right to conquer and rule of people. They were the very first to say we were wrong. And in 2012, the World Council of Churches also denounced the doctrine of discovery. My role in this was, I remember bishops coming to me when they were going to put the resolution through the church. They came to me and said, should we do this? And I just checked with my gut feeling and was like, yes, go ahead, send the resolution through. And they did. And what was interesting was when they passed it, I don't think the Episcopal Church really understood what they passed. I think they just said, oh, this looks good. But I don't really think that they understood that it was something that was going to trigger a big wave. So when the World Council of Churches also repudiated the doctrine of discovery, it was a big deal, but a lot of it was words. It was a lot of media attention around this. A lot of people worldwide were talking about this because it was a big deal. But then at that same year, in 2012, the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition was also founded. And I was really fortunate to be a part of them in the early years. And it was because the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, I was researching boarding schools. I was researching how the church had actually implemented the doctrine of discovery. And so we were talking to the Native American people that were beginning to develop this organization. And at the same time, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was happening in Canada. So in Canada, they were going through their whole process, and there was a lawsuit that when the government and the church were sued by the tribes, the nations, First Nations there, they actually, the churches were the first to settle and pressured the government into settling too. And so that's how their process started, but their process is very different from the US. In the United States, we have a statute of limitations that have been put in place, mostly by Catholic lobbyists, state by state, so that the people that are sexually abused, say our grandmothers, aren't able to actually file because there's a statute of limitation in place. And there have been grandmothers actually that came forward that wanted to see that law overturned. But I'm hopeful with Biden's recent announcement about overturning the statute of limitations, maybe we'll see something different there. But we're definitely coming to a reckoning with the Indian boarding school era here in the US, which, was able to see 15 years ago. And I'll tell you that when I talked to elders 15 years ago about healing from the Indian boarding school era, I had elders laughing in my face about, we don't need to talk about that. We don't need to talk about that. And for myself as a mother, I was realizing that I was affected by the Indian boarding school era because my grandma never told me she loved me until I was 18 years old. She showed me she loved me, but she never said she loved me until I went away to college. That's when she said she loved me. And then I realized with my own children, I was like, why is it so hard for me to say I love you to my own kids? You know, why is it so hard for me to show affection? And I was realizing that was because of this Indian boarding school era. So I, as a mother, was realizing, oh my goodness, there's a lot that I have to do in order to repair this and ensure that my children have access to ceremonies. And so that was my big awakening on how I was affected personally and our communities are affected. So we're all still living in this, but I see as more elders are ready to talk about their healing and share about their healing, and I hear Secretary Holland is actually coming soon to talk about boarding schools and take testimony soon. You know, I think we're coming to that healing space right now. And then recently with the Pope apologizing for their role, that was huge too. I never thought I would see that because the Catholics never said anything about anything for the longest time. So I think that's big. Celebrity allyship. So a lot of the things that started at Standing Rock have influenced us in the media and TV and what we see right now. So Mark Ruffalo showed up at Standing Rock and he developed relationships, and I was actually really fortunate to introduce him to Secretary Holland, Congresswoman Holland at the time, and Congresswoman Sharice Davids. And then he became a really good friend of mine. And then Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas, he utilized his platform to talk about missing murdered Indigenous women at the Video Music Awards. And that was the first time that, you know, we were on TV in such a big way with a big group of people. And he was very intentional about making sure that he wanted me to talk to the media there, actually. Because that wasn't his expertise. He said, why don't you talk to the media about missing murdered Indigenous women? So that was my role there, actually. And then Anne Hathaway, I was introduced to her from Mark, and she wanted to do a land acknowledgement at her Walk of Fame ceremony when she got a star on the Walk of Fame. So I helped advise her for her land acknowledgement, what she said. It's up on, you can find it on YouTube. She said some really beautiful things, but it got a lot of press and a lot of attention from everywhere, like Good Morning America, all these different groups that for her just to say this land doesn't belong to anybody, it's safeguarded by the Tongva people, was a big deal. You can go ahead and play that. So that was actually Indigenous Women Rise. I was a part of organizing back in 2017 when Women's March was coming together. And we helped organize 1,000 women to attend that first march. And in the beginning, we actually weren't on the convener's table. So we called them out and called them in to say, where are the Indigenous women? And they added us and have since then kept us a part of it. And I'm actually still on the board of Women's March right now on the C4 side. But I think it's important to understand that disruption is really important in these areas. And I think doing the work in different ways is important. So I really admire some of those groups that are doing that, disruption, because I think sometimes it's hard for systems to change unless they are disrupted. And when I look at my life, I could say now, oh yes, I'm probably definitely a disruptor. But I probably wouldn't have acknowledged that until just like 5 years ago. Even though when you look at everything I've done, it's been somewhere where I rocked the boat or did something differently or more innovatively. And the reason, my rationale actually for doing my work that way is because growing up on the Pine Ridge Reservation, I understood that my people were still living in conditions that weren't that great. We were still dealing with racial tension, like Rapid City. Like the racial tension here is ridiculous, and for me it was, moving away and coming back, I thought it would change. I moved back during COVID and I was like, no, it's gotten worse. The racism has gotten worse. And so for me, I do think that disruption sometimes has to change. And now, in starting the Zuya Entertainment, I get to tell stories in new ways, which is really exciting. So Mark Ruffalo and I are partnering and we're both executive producers on this new film coming up, Lakota Nation versus the United States. But I have a lot of other projects in the works, and well, they're figuring it out. I just co-founded Zuya Entertainment not even 6 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. With Twyla Troop, who is a Oglala Lakota woman who's now a billionaire. And she came to me and said, it's time. She's a businesswoman, obviously a very successful businesswoman, who has been giving back as well through her foundation. She's been working with a lot of different groups in music, with mostly African American, Latino. She's very diversified in what she invests in, but felt like this was the moment for us to really hit it hard with Native American storytelling. And so that's actually what I'm doing and I'm focused on right now. So this next film, which I hope you all sign up to go see, I hear it's a first come, first serve to sign up at the registration desk. But this project came along and we were asked to support it at an executive producer level. So we're going to be screening it tonight at 6:30 and 9:30, and the spots are limited. So please do come and see it if you're able.
X marks the strange ways of time. How a century ago can feel like yesterday. And, quote, from this day forward feels like never. X marks an agreement. Whatever name one uses to refer to the Black Hills, it is unquestionably the place of our beginning. And another X marks this land as ours, unquestionably by treaty.
We premiered at Tribeca Film Festival, and we have the private screening tonight. So be sure to sign up if you want to attend. But also, we're going to do a public screening next month. So we're working on that in the works. So we wish we could do it for everybody, but we're going to give you all sort of a sneak peek into what we're going to be showing. And it will be streaming nationally by January. And my book that's coming out, my sister and I like I said, we're both twins, and so about 5 years ago, we individually came up with this. I remember going to her, and I just said, hey, I think I'm supposed to write a book. Like, I thought I was really special, and Takashla was just talking to me. And she was like, me too. And I said, well, what's your book about? And she said, healing. I said, mine too. And like, I think we're supposed to write this together. And so we came up with this idea to write a self-help memoir, because we felt like we couldn't tell everybody's stories, but we could tell our own stories in our lives of what we had to deal with on the reservation. And that we could talk about healing in order to heal our own people, but also to help others understand our worldview. So every chapter, this actually lists out the different chapters that we have. We tell our stories, and at the end is a kind of a self-help section. But we give tips on how to be an ally, how to be a good relative, how to reclaim spirit, how to follow intuition, how to heal from trauma, identify your calling, honor your sacredness, resolve conflict, and return and reconnect. And it's published by Feminist Press. So I want to work on actually a book launch event here at the end of January. It'll be cold, but we could do it. It's perfect for self-help season though. So you can also pre-order it right now. And we are giving out galley copies. Those are the first versions of the book. So if there is media that's interested in reading our book, we are also sending those off to people as well. Go ahead and play it. And this is the project that I won the Emmy for.
Crowd? Crowd? Crowd's here?
The story is that there was a permanent spring on the earth and the weather was perfect, and winter comes upon the earth and the animals get together and try to decide what to do about it.
Someone must fly to the one who creates everything by thinking.
Moths can fly.
Yeah, but you just fly right into the sun.
They need to send the crow because he can fly. And in his trip, he has to make some sacrifices, but the sacrifice is what saved his community.
And now he'll make any sacrifice to save us.
It's a really amazing experience because this makes you feel like really emotionally
All right.
connected to everybody.
Let's see what you're really made of. What resonates with me in this story is that we're a community that is diverse and that our differences also make us stronger and make us more unified.
So this project was created by Veilbox Studios and Get Lifted, and the 2D version is actually on YouTube right now. You can look it up, Pro the Legend, but it's also on Oculus, those little goggles they have. And their idea behind creating it was that they wanted to create a cornerstone virtual reality project, and they wanted to tell an Indigenous story. We have a lot to fix in the systems of the media, because I would have loved to have it a little bit more indigenized, but it's a very generic story about how the crow became Black. But I really enjoyed being a part of that film. And in the beginning, I never knew that we would win an Emmy, actually. It was like, I didn't even know we could win an Emmy. And so I was super surprised that we won an Emmy. And I was really grateful, and it also put me squarely into storytelling. And I got to unbox that Emmy as well. You can go to the next slide. So in closing, I'm going to share this moment with you. I grew up in a HUD house on a reservation outside Martin, South Dakota, like I mentioned, and my grandmother has been a Head Start cook. She's helped clean houses, she's done everything to help her family. And I was one of the people that she helped and raised. And I got the Emmy and I took it home to her, and then I unboxed it with her for the first time. And my kids are in the background.
That's so crazy!
Yeah, look at where you are.
Whoa! What does it say?
It says 2018-2019 Daytime Emmy Awards, Outstanding Interactive Media for a Daytime Program, Pro the Legend, Veilbox Studios, Sarah Eaglehart, consulting producer.
Yeah! And Abby!
We asked my grandma what she thought, and she said, "I'm crying." I know, she's so sweet. She just turned 87 this year. Her birthday was on September 20th. So that's a big one, as you guys know, coming through COVID. I was really grateful that she was able to make it. Go to the next slide. So thank you for having me. That's just a little bit about my perspective of the world and how I've utilized media and the work that I do. And like I said, I have been much more of a disruptor, truth teller. I also think that's from the Oglala side, we're kind of more direct. And it was really important for me to see an impact. And so for me, working in storytelling and the media now, I see that as my pathway to contribute back and to tell our stories and make sure that the education and knowledge that we have is safeguarded but also shared, and so that we hopefully, if we can change mainstream media and society to understanding who we are as Indigenous peoples, then I really hope that that's going to change the racism and the stereotypes and all of those dynamics that we still have to deal with. And I think that I can do it and make bigger impact in the media through storytelling. So, Adapia Oyase.
How about one more big round of applause for Sarah Eaglehart? And again, Miss Eaglehart, I have to apologize. I meant no disrespect by fumbling her last name. And I was kicking myself the whole time. Like I got all sweaty and nervous and had to go outside and have a chadi and all that kind of stuff. But subconsciously what was happening is my daughter-in-law is Sarah Eagle Elk. And my grandson is an Eagle Elk. So, I'm just used to saying that. So again, everything here, very beautiful, very amazing, truly a great accomplishment. So one more round of applause, please. The Lakota Media Summit, this is a big deal. This is a very big deal for our people, because as we now start telling our stories and as we start rewriting our narratives, it's huge, because Hollywood has had it wrong from day one. And so all these kinds of things are the right steps for our people. So again, another round of applause for Thunder Valley for putting this together for each and every one of us. And right now, friends and relatives, we're going to be going into 2 breakout sessions. And they're going to be starting on about 2 minutes or so, right around there, so you have some time. Okay, so cultivating the next generation of journalists for the future. Shirley Sneed. That's going to be in the private dining room this way. And if you point like an Indian, it's that way. Okay, not that far. They said, yeah. And then our other breakout session, Mr. Dekshi Rick Two Dogs. Okay, that's going to be Lakota traditional protocol for approaching Lakota elders and our community members. Both very, very important breakout sessions. So ladies and gentlemen, you are free to move about to head to the breakout sessions. After that, we are going to be gathering for a panel. And then right after the panel, we're going to be meeting back here about 12:20 for lunch.
Just one announcement really quick. As Sarah mentioned, we are having 2 private screenings of Lakota Nation versus United States this evening at the Journey Museum. The first showing is at 6:30. After that, there will be a reception and some Q&A. With some of those associated with the film, and then again at 9:30. We have limited seats for those that are attending the media summit, so if you're interested, the sign up is at the registration table. You'll leave your name and your email address, and then you'll get a ticket in your email for this evening. So again, it's first come, first serve. I believe we have 55 slots for the 6:30 and then 15 for the 9:30. So just wanted to make that announcement.
And in the meantime, again, out in the hallway, there are poster boards of the agenda. The breakout sessions are now beginning, and we'll see everyone back in here around 12:20-ish for lunch. Ohacha.
Black Hills.